Okay, guess that means we're getting started. So welcome everyone to the first general meeting of 2022. Thanks for joining today. It's really exciting to see so many faces, even if on Zoom. For those of you who don't know me, which there may be a few, I am Elena Frazier, the current chapter of AA, current president of the Santa Barbara chapter of AA, and also practicing architect here in Santa Barbara. A special thank you to our presenters, Tess Harris and Dave Davis, for taking the time to share with us today about the ongoing State Street Master Plan work. Personally, I'm really looking forward to hearing more about this exciting and important community effort. So really appreciative to both of you for making the time for us today. And before launching into that main presentation, I do have just a few quick chapter business items to discuss, and then I'll also be giving a few moments over to our meeting sponsors, Upmarket Media. We're going to give them a brief moment to have them tell us more about what they do. Sort of first on the business items list is a really exciting announcement that we have a newly licensed architect in our midst today. She's a member of the AIA board. She's serving on the executive committee as secretary this year, and that's Alyssa Overjorgi, who just completed all her licensing requirements. So congratulations, Alyssa. It's a big deal. So
thank you so much.
Thank you for your service to our chapter as well. I'd also like to just extend my personal gratitude to all of our committee chairs and active committee members, many of whom are on the call today. You all have kicked off this year with really ambitious and aspirational objectives, and I am in awe every day of your dedication to our mission and really deeply appreciative of all the hours that you give to our organization. So thank you, both from the AIA and from me personally. I encourage anyone on the call today, whether you're an AIA member, or not a member, a community member, if you're interested in the work of our committees, please visit the AIA Santa Barbara website, which has a lot of information on all of their efforts. And feel free to reach out to a committee chair or our executive director, Tara, if you're interested in becoming involved. We really welcome and need greater involvement. Specifically, I'd like to report on one important ongoing effort from one of our advocacy subcommittees, the Healthy Housing Committee. I'm honored to be co-chairing that committee with Cass Ensberg, who's on the call today. And this committee was set up when news of the Munger Hall dormitory project came to light. We had a lot of members who wrote in with concerns, and it's obviously been all over the news. So this subcommittee's been working to stop the project in its current windowless form from moving forward. And we now have, after a lot of hard work and ongoing productive dialogue with various UC regents who are also concerned about the project. And additionally, we have ongoing conversations with various code change organizations, and our committee will actually be submitting a code change petition to the California Building Standards Commission shortly that would ensure natural light for all residential sleeping spaces in buildings in California. So really important efforts from that committee. Our PR committee chair, Matt Beausoleil, also would like to make a quick announcement to the group. Matt, take it away.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. It's good to see some faces here, some familiar faces. And for those of you who don't know who I am, my name's Matt Beausoleil. I'm the current Public Relations and Outreach Committee Chair for our chapter. And I'm here today to let you all know about a great opportunity that our chapter has and that you have. The local periodical, the Santa Barbara Independent, has offered our chapter a regular article in its publication to speak about topics around architecture. You may have seen it. It's called Architecturally Speaking. And we're currently looking for authors, members of our chapter that would like to contribute articles, even just ideas that we could focus on or should focus on This is a great opportunity to have your voice and our chapter's voice reach a wider audience in our community. So, and especially around subjects that you're passionate about. So I am going to place my email in the chat. If everyone should know where the chat is, but it's in the bottom of your screen. Go ahead and click it there and you'll see my email there. And if you're interested in contributing an article, an idea on the subject, send me a quick note. I and the PR committee will reach out to you. We'll need to kind of work on the article together. But we're happy to help and really hear what you're interested in. So please send me an email, and thanks everyone for your time. Thanks, Elena.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I think it's really important to be reminded of that platform that we've been given. And I think it's great that the independent, they want to hear from us. So I know it's a goal this year to definitely try and get a few more articles out in that column. All right, and last but not least, I'd like to introduce our meeting sponsors, Upmarket Media. We have Mark and Reed here with us today from them, and I'd just like to say how grateful we are for the support of local businesses and individuals who sponsor our events. We really couldn't do what we do without you. So I'm going to hand the mic over to Mark and Reed and give them a few moments to tell us more about what they do.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. We're happy to be here. My name is Mark. This is Reed, my business partner, and we run a full-service media company in Ventura. We service all of Southern California, and I'm just going to go ahead and start my screen share here.
Yeah, so we specialize in working with architects and real estate agents, and we do photography, video, and then 3D technology. In fact, we did a video, I believe, for Mark Whitman that I think he showed you all of his house last fall. That was a great project, a beautiful house. But what we really want to talk to you today is kind of introduce our Matterport 3D technology. A lot of you may be familiar with it. We work a lot with Jacob Nixto, who I saw was on here, and then like Dylan Chappelle in Ventura, in doing Matterport scans of the spaces that they're basically going to remodel. So Mark, you want to hit it? So Matterport 3D technology is we go with a 3D camera in an interior space and make an exact digital twin of that space that then you have access to remotely. And there's so many different things you can do with it. You can walk through the space, you can view it in a dollhouse way, you can output floor plans that are 99.9% accurate, and you can go into the space and measure. So we'll go over some of that right now.
Yeah, so I just want to go over a few of the features. One of the main features with the Matterport is that it eliminates multiple visits to a site. You don't need to revisit or send people out in the field to get measurements or check on the placements of items. You can essentially just open the link, go through and look at the scan. It's always there. It's in the cloud. You can access it from any device.
And then one of the best features is you can take measurements remotely, and we're going to kind of show that in just a few moments. We'll give you a little brief on it. And then the collaboration tool, so whoever you're collaborating with, whether it's a builder or a designer or anyone can go in and access this space from wherever they are.
Yeah, another great feature is the 3D model that we create. You can import that directly into your BIM software. You can overlay it on your plans. You can look at it and manipulate it that way. So it's very useful.
All right, so this is a model we did last year. There was like a giant 55,000 square foot ground floor of a Macy's that was about to get remodeled. So we went in and scanned it. So you can see this is like Google Street View, but for an interior space. So you can walk through it, you can spin it however you want. You can look at the ceiling, you can look at the floor, you can walk through. You really get a sense of what the space is like. And especially I think for these giant commercial projects, it's like so nice to be able to just walk through and see kind of anything in the space. And of course we also do it for residential projects. So this is a smaller home. I believe this one we did, the house was for sale. This wasn't for an architect client, but like you get a sense. I mean, there's no better way that I know of that you can remotely walk through a space and really feel what that space is like.
Absolutely, yeah, and this is another great feature that we can output once we've completed the scan as a schematic floor plan with all of the accurate measurements on it. Gives us a total square footage. You can also get a reflected ceiling floor plan also that you can share.
Yeah, and this is, I think, what we're going to show now is the remote measuring, which is, I think, kind of the aha moment that a lot of people have when I talk to architects about this, is you can sit there in your office and take accurate measurements of anything in the home. So it's super simple. You just point and click. And again, these measurements are super accurate. So if it's 6 months down the road and you can't remember where that power outlet was, well, you can walk back, you find it, and you can see exactly how far it is from the doorway. Kind of anything you need, you can do from the comfort of your office. You don't have to send someone out an hour to that job site to remeasure anything.
So yeah, just a little bit more about outputting it and bringing it into your BIM software. I know there's a lot of words on here, but it's essentially you can bring it into Revit, into AutoCAD, you can overlay it, we can output files. You guys probably speak this language a lot better than we do, but the OBJ files, RVT files, floor plans, all of that things you can bring back into your software.
Yeah. And then, yeah, so basically the packages start around $300 on up, and it's based on square footage. So, and usually this cost is a pass through to your client. So, and I know some of our clients actually will kind of upcharge our costs. And so it is something that you can even maybe make a little bit of money on. Yeah, and it's like, I think I've heard from so many architects, it's like life-changing. It's like it really, really makes their workflow so much more efficient. And so we're happy to answer any questions anytime. You can hit us up on email or on the phone. And we're just really thankful that you've allowed us a few minutes to kind of talk about this.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you both. That was great. Yeah, I know we've definitely dipped our toes in the Matterport world recently. So thanks for sharing.
And by the way, we also cover all of Southern California. So we're based in Ventura County, but we do Santa Barbara County, we do LA County. We're, and for bigger projects, we'll travel. That Macy's was in Rancho Cucamonga, and we went out and did that. So thank you.
Thanks again. All right, I think now we're moving on to the main presentation for today. I'm going to hand over the introductions of our speakers to Paul Rupp, who's an AI Santa Barbara board director, architect, and active member of our advocacy committee. And he'll be introducing our speakers. Thanks, Paul.
Hey, welcome everybody. I can speak for our whole organization. We're very excited to continue our leadership and vision and dialogue with the community, with the city leadership in building on our 2020 design charrette for State Street that the organization led to reinvigorate, reinvent, reimagine, and repurpose State Street. And today we're very blessed with two leaders of the effort as we transition from vision to community consensus and implementation of what's possible in the transformation of our community. And so today we have Suzanne, who's on the advisory board, and if Ed Lengwick's here, he also serves as AI members on that committee. But today we're going to hear from both Tess Harris and Dave Davis. And it's a little hard to give a brief summary of both since they're both very accomplished people, but I'll start with Tess. Tess is an extraordinary planning professional. She joined the city of Santa Barbara to lead this master plan effort as the State Street master planner. She spent 3 years at the county of Santa Barbara as a senior planner, and then 5 years at the county of Ventura in that planning efforts. She values clean water and healthy oceans because she was a Fulbright scholar to Cyprus and did irrigation policy and water conservation in Cyprus as part of that effort. She also worked with the State Department, the Bureau of Oceans and OES on UN Conference for Sustainable Development. She also did work at Pacific Grove on their watershed models and storm treatment measures and tree inventory. She was also a member of the U.S. delegation to the UN Conference on Sustainable Development and is a leader in the American Planning Association. She has a Bachelor of Environmental Studies at UCSB and a Master's of International Studies from the prestigious Middlebury Institute. Dave Davis is a community elder and leader. He's a positive agent of change and has demonstrated through with his decades of work here in Santa Barbara. He's a seeker of knowledge, a teacher and professor. He spent 25 years with the City of Santa Barbara's development director and city planner. He's a past CEO of the Canadian Environmental Council, so he values the environment and sustainability. He serves as a board member of the Metropolitan Transit Authority, so he expands his interest into transportation issues, which are core in all city planning. He's won countless awards and accolades, including a Lifetime Achievement Award from our AIA, as well as one from Santa Barbara Beautiful. And it clearly, like, he values the power of creating beautiful and functional places through visionary design. He holds a bachelor's and a master's degrees in economics from UCSB. And with that, those are our presenters today, and we feel very honored that you're willing to include us in the master plan documents themselves, and also honor us with a good, healthy dialogue so we can support your process, the community, and the consensus building process ahead. And with that, I will give you to Tess.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. And I just want to start out by thanking AIA. It's really wonderful to be here today and to be with all of you and to talk about the State Street Master Plan. I know Dave feels the same way. So I'm going to kick us off with a presentation and then leave the majority of the time for Q&A. And Dave and I are happy to answer any questions and have further dialogue at that point as well. So just kind of as a background, many things have happened over the last 5 years, certainly highlighting the AIA charrettes, both in 2017 and 2020, that really created a vision for downtown. We also had a State Street subcommittee that was formed shortly after the closure. That subcommittee was formed in June of 2020. With 3 council members, Councilmember Harmon, Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez, and Councilmember Sneddon. And they were looking at interim promenade guidance and kind of visioning of State Street, and then setting recommendations for council for what to do following this initial temporary closure. And so the State Street Advisory Committee was formed in the summer of 2021, and the first meeting was held in August of last year. So this map shows you what the closure looks like today. So back May 22nd of 2020, there was an emergency order to close the street, as many of you know. And then May 28th, an ordinance went into effect. And that was the emergency ordinance that allowed us to have this street closure. That's since changed a little bit to an economic recovery ordinance that's in effect until the end of 2023. And I'll get into that in a moment. But I just want to highlight that there's about 8 blocks that are closed today. If you go kind of up to from the 1300 block to about the 400 block, you get about a mile in length for the space. Just some photos of the closure. So again, the Economic Recovery Extension and Transition Ordinance, it's effective till the end of 2023. And the thinking behind that timeframe is that we're hoping that a master plan is online and ready around that timeframe. So before I get into the State Street Advisory Committee and the master plan and the request for proposals, I want to talk just briefly about another committee, the State Street Interim Operations Ad Hoc Committee. This is a committee that was really recently formed. It was formed shortly after the Economic Recovery Extension and Transition Ordinance went before Council in January of this year to look at and address various needs that might be more immediate to downtown and to State Street than the master plan. So looking at fire lane compliance, the 20-foot fire lane requirement that went into effect March 8th. They're also looking at accessibility requirements and working with a consultant to ensure that business spaces are meeting ADA needs. And then they're going to be looking at other potential issues as well. So it's a small group of council members, and the intent is for staff and council to be able to work and come up with solutions for this interim period before the master plan is in place. And just want to highlight that this committee is staffed a little bit differently. So it's staffed through Public Works with the interim downtown manager, that's Jessica Grant. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to get you her contact information on this process. So now I'm going to transition into the State Street Advisory Committee. This is the committee that was formed in August, really with the intent of looking long-term into the future, expanding upon the vision that AIA envisioned in 2020 through the design charrette, and really helping to come up with a master plan. So there are 15 members of the committee with 2 alternates. This just gives you a quick snapshot of where you can find additional information if you're interested. We do meet once a month. Our next meeting will be April 18th. So if anybody is interested, of course, encourage you to attend and hope to see some of you there. Our membership, the State Street Advisory Committee, I won't read off all of the names, but these are all of the committee members on the SSAC. So we have members from the community at large, we have business representatives, and then we have representatives from City Council, the Planning Commission, and the Historic Landmarks Commission. I just want to highlight one of the pieces that's on the link I showed earlier, and that's the resources page. So we do have links to the AIA work that's occurred on that page, and we also have a number of other things that we want the committee to be aware of and to really educate themselves on. It's an open document, so members of the public are certainly welcome to take a look as well. And just trying to compile different things, whether it be news articles or resources from the city or resources elsewhere that might be of interest as we're looking at kind of downtown revitalization and revisioning. So now I'll just give a quick snapshot of kind of where this committee has been so far, and then I'll talk about the State Street Master Plan in a little bit more detail. So we were formed in August, and I actually joined closer to September from the city. So at the beginning, the first meeting was really an understanding for the group on what occurred up until that point. Dave Davis and Ken Saxon were appointed as the chair and vice chair of the committee. And really it was kind of an overview and getting to know each other meeting. The next meeting, we talked about the vision principles that were identified by the State Street Subcommittee, the 3 council members prior to this advisory committee. And then we looked at an overall timeline for what this process might take and what different steps along the way the group needed to take in order for it to be successful. And then in October, we looked at examples from other cities, other downtown master plans, or downtown, various types of downtown plans. So we looked at Burlington, Vermont, Boulder, Colorado, San Luis Obispo, and a few other cities. And then we started to talk about areas of focus, items that are in the scope of work for the request for proposals, and what this master plan really would be looking at. And the October meeting was kind of the first touch on what the RFP was going to look like and the overall process there. And then in November, we focused, actually, one of the things that I'm really grateful, Ken led the effort on this one, but we created operating principles for the State Street Advisory Committee, ensuring that the group can work well together and that we have a common collective set of principles, both individually and as a group. And then we worked on the draft request for proposals and got feedback from the committee and introduced the economic recovery ordinance. And then in January, we again talked about the RFP. The RFP is sort of an ongoing piece in all of our meetings, and I anticipate that will happen up until we select a consultant. And then we talked a little bit about the 400 block and the challenges that the 400 block presents in terms of public safety with closing that block and the potential opportunities there as well. And then in February, we transitioned a little bit. So recognizing that we have a few months from February until about the time we have a consultant on board, we want to really use the time to educate the group and make sure that we can get everybody collectively up to speed and aware of the various issues that we're going to be really tackling once a consultant joins us. And so we started out with a panel discussion on retail and commercial spaces downtown, and had a lot of great people on that panel, including Amy Cooper and Bob Tuller, Peter Rupert, and Peter Lewis, who's a member of the State Street Advisory Committee. And then that was moderated by Marge Caffarelli, also a member. And then in March, again, we talked briefly about the RFP, and then we looked at the future of tourism downtown. We had Kathy Janega Dykes from Visit Santa Barbara join us, and talk a little bit about the statistics of what their organization is seeing for tourism and has seen over the past couple of years. We also had our downtown parking, both a representative from the Downtown Parking Committee and a staff member come and present on cleaning, maintenance, and the operations downtown. And they took really a day in the life of State Street from midnight until midnight and what happens every hour during a 24-hour period. I found that to be actually pretty interesting. And so that's where we've been so far, and really looking forward to other discussions that we're anticipating to have with the State Street Advisory Committee until we get a consultant on board, including, which I'm excited about, having the AAA come and talk to us about all of the work that you've done in 2017 and in 2020 through the design charrettes and other work as well. And we can chat about that more too. So jumping right into the State Street Master Plan, just as kind of a high level, these are the key elements that we're anticipating having in a final master plan. So I want to really highlight the public outreach and engagement piece. There's been a lot of work done so far on getting the community on board and excited about this downtown revitalization and revisioning and the master plan process. We want to build upon that and expand it and ensure that we're reaching the entire community as we come up with a final master plan. So that'll be a key element. And then looking at existing conditions and making sure that we really understand all of the pieces to the puzzle, as well as some technical studies. So looking at things like utilities, I think the biggest one is going to be the circulation component and really understanding from a mobility perspective what exists today and using those inputs to help us come up with opportunities and solutions. And then what we're calling an urban design framework plan. So that's really the conceptual plan for what we want downtown to look like, both from the design perspective, kind of more the perhaps traditional sense in terms of what the space physically looks like, but then also what the space is going to provide. So what types of people might enjoy being in the space, and how do we ensure that it's a space for everybody, and how do we make sure that this space interacts really well with the other areas surrounding it and the broader Santa Barbara community. And then the implementation plan. So this can all really, I don't think will be successful unless we have a really excellent implementation plan. And so what I mean by that is not only the financing and funding piece, but looking at how we can actually achieve this type of a project. It's a large scale capital improvement project in the end. And so whether it be phasing or a different approach, the implementation plan, I think, will help with that. So just touching quickly on the schedule. So this is a kind of a broad schedule of where what we anticipate the timeline to be. I'm actually hoping that this schedule is the longest it could go, and that we might come up a bit closer to 2023 than 2024 with the final result, but we'll see. And so really anticipating we get a consultant on board soon, and that the process with a consultant will be about 1.5 to 2 years, but that again may shift depending on the proposals. And so these are some of the elements that are being incorporated into the master plan. And so on March 9th of 2021, Council had initiated this master planning process through the State Street Subcommittee. And they formed the advisory committee, and that committee looked at the subcommittee's recommendations for these elements and made some modifications. And then we went back to City Council in November to go through this list and ensure that this is what we want to be looking at in the scope of work for the master plan. So these are all what I would call different inputs for the master plan. Some some pieces we're going to be touching on probably more so than others, but they'll all need to be looked at and analyzed. So now I'm going to transition and provide just a quick overview for the request for proposals. So again, this is a general roadmap. I use this slide pretty regularly with the State Street Advisory Committee, and I've used it with City Council too. It's just showing kind of where in the process for the RFP we are right now. So I'm happy to say that we're in the selection process. The RFP closed March 24th, so shortly ago. And so now we're in the process and hoping to do interviews and in the next couple months and have a finalist. So what we're looking to hear from consultants and what we're anticipating having in response, a lot of things that might be standard for a project. I just wanted to highlight a couple. So we're wanting to hear from the respondents different placemaking examples. So what they've done in the past for placemaking and urbanism. And then we also asked for a conceptual design of one street on State Street. So the idea here is that it could be a narrative, it could be more of a design, but we really want to understand what the firm is thinking of and how they understand community needs and how they might be thinking about kind of innovative ideas to bring to the group. Really, we're looking for kind of big thinking, creative solutions. And so I'll jump into, we can kind of touch on that further if you'd like. When we get into Q&A, I'll touch just briefly on some of the deliverables. So I mentioned before the public engagement strategy, and I'll highlight that one here.
Okay,
well.
Tess, can I jump in for just 1 second?
Sure, please, Dave.
There are two major questions we asked of the people that are proposing too. One was there are multiple challenges from climate, public health, disasters, economic, social changes, the future of Main Street retailing. In order to have a vibrant, engaging public space, what's your vision? What's your vision for how a successful downtown should be redeveloped today and for the future? What are the principles that are core to your approach and your perspective on how to foster success in downtown core? So we want to really kind of get into their thinking of the future. And the second one was, and this is important, I think, do you envision the downtown Santa Barbara State Street Master Plan that will result from the project to be primarily a landscape hardscape plan, or do you see the project plan as invoking a more flexible and less fixed hard cost approach, and why? What steps do you believe needed to be taken to ensure the long-term success of downtown after the master plan is completed? We really wanted to get their high-level thinking as to the future of downtown. Go ahead.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate that. Yeah, and that's really a key piece is I think looking beyond just what can be designed, but how people are thinking about the interaction. Wanting to make this a civic space, a space that everybody can enjoy. Retail and dining is great, but we don't want the space to only be for those two purposes. We want it to really transcend beyond that and beyond what it exists today. And so just kind of going into the deliverables that we're looking at, really public engagement as being one of the primary pieces. So wanting to have the most kind of well thought out public engagement strategy for the State Street Master Plan, wanting to think of really just different ways to do it. I will be the first to say that government is not always the best when it comes to public engagement. And so we want to shift that a little bit. We want to try to get out to the community as broad as possible, go to different events, make sure we're getting all different populations involved, ensure that we're not just communicating in English, but also communicating effectively in Spanish. And so really this is a huge component of the project. And I think I hope we'll make it successful as a result. And so then the urban design framework and implementation plan are other kind of key deliverables. Just touching on the urban design framework a little bit more, again, kind of design not in just the sense of the physical space, but how people are going to interact with the space. And then in terms of implementation, kind of looking at the financing approach, looking at what can be done in the near term and what can be done in kind of longer term, and figuring out the timing of different pieces for the project. This could mean pilot projects. It could mean more of a phased approach. It could be a district or block by block approach. So we're sort of open to different ideas and thoughts. All of that to say that one of the key questions that's still out there today is what is the closure going to look like in the long term? And I wish I had an answer for everybody right now. That's something that we're really going to be tackling when we get a firm on board to figure out if the closure will look the same as it does today, or if it will look a little bit different than what exists. And then also on deliverables, just making sure that we have the draft and the final plans, and then also facilitation. So looking at that assistance from the consultant, and that'll also be certainly supplemented with staff work, and staff will be doing a lot of different elements of these pieces as well, but having a team behind will be helpful. And so again, just kind of jumping back into the timeline that we're looking at. So anticipating really kicking things off in May to July. I'm hoping for sooner than later, so we'll see, but just going through the selection process right now. And so with that, I'll just open it up. If anybody has any questions, happy to take them. And I know Dave is as well. And Dave, before we do, was there anything that you wanted to add?
No, I think you covered it quite well. And I think Tess and I are here really to answer your questions. We're early in the process, right? Again, we're telling you essentially the roadmap of where we're going. I think in the next couple of months, as we get to the selection of a consultant and the actual public participation process, we know that your organization and all of you as individuals are going to be actively involved over the next year and a half in the development of this plan. So we wanted to come to you today to basically, again, thank you for all the work that you've done to date. I want to incorporate you and invite you to our next meeting, if we could, to talk about your active involvement to date and how you see your role in the future. And while I know many of you, I don't know all of you, but I hope through this process I get to personally meet all of you in that regard. So it's our pleasure to be here today, and we will answer any questions.
Hey, and if you'll we can either have you put your questions in the chat, and if we can manage unmuting you and have you ask him directly, we'll try that. We'll just work it, but probably through the chat primarily. And Dave, I was going to start with a question to you. I heard you mention this at one of the meetings, and I'd like you to kind of speak to it. And I think in a really interesting and kind of creative way, you talked about the temporal nature of State Street and its success kind of at all times of the day, all times of the season, all times of the year. If you kind of speak to what you meant by that, because I thought that was a very insightful way to look at the activity and the programming success of what State Street could be.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Again, you've kind of framed it pretty well there. Many times when we do these master plans, they're looking at night, day, and weekend, weekday, whatever. We really see the street as a living organism, and the fact that there is the opportunity to maximize the use of the space, and as Tess said, for community activities, much broader than it's been done before. It isn't just retailing, it isn't just parades. There's so much more that can happen in a vital downtown. And we really wanted to stimulate people's thought. And again, hoping that through this process, we'll get ideas from folks such as yourselves as to how the design elements can facilitate the temporal use over time for the street for public uses, not just the private uses.
Okay, I'll read the first question. Will the in-person meetings continue to be recorded and made available to watch after the meetings?
Yes, they will be. So we stream our meetings on the city's YouTube channel. And it'll be the meetings will continue to be available there. And then if you want to participate in public comment, certainly you're welcome to send me an email before, and I can send the comment out to the State Street Advisory Committee ahead of the meeting. Otherwise, I hope that you would consider attending our meetings. We are transitioning back to in-person, which I'm looking forward to. And I just saw a note about, I'll put my email in the chat. It looks like there are a couple people
Okay, and then
that had asked for it.
next question. Can you talk more specifically about the master plan is looking to address housing and sustainability?
Yes.
Sure. Yeah, so there are a couple, I'll maybe start with the housing piece. So the city is doing a lot of work right now on housing with the housing element update, the conversation around FAR recently. And so I don't see the State Street Master Plan as redoing or doing that work necessarily. I see the master plan as being a document that can really speak to a lot of the other housing efforts that are currently happening at the city. At the same time, we do need to be thinking about housing downtown and where it could be and what it could look like and how more housing might invigorate the space a little bit differently than exists today. So I do see that as a component. And then in terms of sustainability, I mean, absolutely, that's also going to be a piece that we want to make sure really goes throughout the process. And again, I don't have a concrete thing to tell you for what it will be, but we will be looking at sustainability throughout.
And I just make a comment that the housing thing, as you know, the city's been working on for the last couple of years and very heavily involved in downtown now. At one point, of course, council said we weren't going to do intense housing downtown, but they essentially flipped that paradigm in that regard. So housing is going to happen downtown. So I think in this discussion of the master plan, the degree and extent of that housing will be obviously one of the main elements. Sustainability, of course, is a broad thing. I have a personal little thing I really want to get you to see discussed, and that is a microgrid for downtown. That's something which I think it's just ripe for essentially discussion, implementation. So yes, the typical sustainability type issues from water, what have you, but going into something in terms of like a microgrid, tying downtown together for the future, something I really want to see discussed.
Okay, next question. Will the AIA Will AIA be previewed to narrow down the interview process, or generally will the public be involved in the selection process?
Again, in the sense that the selection process, the recommendation from staff will go to the city council in a public hearing. That will be the point where the public can have some involvement. But this will be a normal selection process for a consultant, which essentially will be vetted through staff, some input hopefully coming from the SSAC informally, but the actual recommendation going to council from the staff itself.
Next question. I watched the first couple of meetings and I'm impressed with the composition of the committee. I'm curious why the committee, why the committee did not establish the preferred uses of the spaces, bikes, shuttles, parades, etc., prior to bringing in the consultants.
Actually, can I answer that one, Tess?
Sure.
Okay, be real honest with you, because the city started the process without an idea of where it was going. Usually you would have gone out, gotten a consultant, then formed a committee, and then talked about those types of things with the committee and the consultant. That is what we want to do, start that process this summer.
And that's one of the first things I think we'll really need to be diving in.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the next one, this is limited to the public ROW and won't necessarily get into recommendations for parcels and adjacent to the ROO/State Street, correct?
So it is I mean, yes, we're looking at the public right of way, but we're also looking at the connectivity between different spaces. So just like we can't decide necessarily if business X is going to change to business Y. I think it's still important to recognize what exists and what could exist in those spaces in order for this to be longer term. I'll just maybe add to that this is a little bit different than what I've seen most cities do as a result of COVID. So there are a lot of cities that have created a pedestrianized space over the last couple of years of varying lengths and varying degrees. And there are a lot of cities that are looking to keep their pedestrianized space in the long term. I've talked to some of them, and many of them are looking at it from a little bit different approach. I think both of them are certainly valid. The approach of sort of looking at it from the legal and technical standpoint of closing the street and making sure that that closure can exist, that is one approach. This is a little bit different. And what I mean by that is that whole long list of elements that are anticipated to be included in the scope of work. It's not just looking at what the closure is going to look like. It's really looking at downtown overall and how all those pieces fold into each other to make it successful. And so, I'm really hoping that we can take it and yes, it might take a little bit longer than just closing the street, but I think in the long run, it's going to be more beneficial for the city overall.
I would just add that and again, I think you used the term, it is a re-envisioning of the future of downtown. That is public and private spaces. So it isn't simply right-of-way areas. It is essentially, you talked about the mix of uses, intensity of uses, and the public space on top of that.
Okay, next question, this is from Cyrus. The missing piece in the master plan is having secondary and tertiary public spaces. There are some efforts to create secondary spaces, like a couple of courtyards, which is fantastic, but there are rooms for improvement. Is there any future plan to spread the promenade to other areas, not only State Street? Then they can work as a single system.
So the master plan, the area for the master plan that was identified by council was from Sola to the underpass and then Chapala to Anacapa Street. So at least those spaces, I would say, will be looked at in terms of potential pedestrian closure. And we might see something a little different. So perhaps we see different connections from the 0 blocks to State Street than you see today. I'm not sure. I think a lot of that conversation is going to be around mobility and how we move people from one section of downtown to another as well. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's not just I want to kind of take a step back, and it's not just looking at it from State Street as a street, and that's the design and that's the closure. We want it to be able to connect with the different paseos that we have downtown. We want it to be able to connect with the other areas like De La Guerra Plaza, like the Library Plaza, other places too that may become, our civic spaces or our other areas for people to gather. So I hope that answers the question, but certainly wanting to get there.
Okay, next question. First of all, thank you, Tess and Dave. With the community as the quote client, can you talk about how the process will include full community input throughout the entire process from beginning to end to embrace community critique and input that will be considered and incorporated?
I can start on that one, Tess. Thanks, Cass. Public participation, I think, has been our main focus, that this is a public participation process. And the RFP that we put out there was, if you're going to propose to us, you need to lay out a really, really robust public participation outline. They've just come in, Tess and staff is going to be going over those. That's going to be one of the highly weighted criteria in the selection process. So no, I don't think we can tell you today, this is what the process is going to be like, but that's our number one priority. You might have seen the article by Josh Moline a couple of weeks ago about the cost, the $800,000 estimated budget. And he's asked, why does it cost so much and why is it going to take so long? And my simple answer was, this is a community master plan. We want the community involved over a 1.5 year process. It's going to take both the technical studies on the one hand and a really masterful public participation process that takes time and money in order to do that. So it is our #1 priority, Cass, and we will be back to you once we've made the selection process to work with the community as to how to make that happen.
I don't see another question, but I will ask a question. And part of it is my own personal experience of a lot of public-private projects where really we're able to leverage the philanthropy of the community into creating both soft costs of planning and design, as well as hard cost of building things. I guess my question is, how can we best as a community integrate with both the advisory committee and the process to get different community groups who are interested in partnering with the city in public-private partnerships, foundations, to support the what would be a State Street, public shared space for both designing it, funding that, and also funding the development of capital projects, as well as ongoing programming for those spaces. So that's my question.
Yeah, well, you're already ahead of us in that regard, because that's exactly what we're thinking also. Where we're going is going to be a public-private participation project, and it's going to be something which is ongoing in the future, and we're going to need a financial structure to make that happen also. So Paul, you're seeing it the same way we are. I think when the consultant gets hired, we'll be sitting down with groups such as yours and basically brainstorm that out as we go through this process. But boy, you've already basically kind of like, you've seen where I want to see us go.
Okay, thanks for that answer. Okay, next question. Let's see. Would encourage you to engage existing neighborhood associations. These represent hundreds of homeowners who live here, and many have strong thoughts about downtown. So I guess that's more of a comment that to encourage you to engage with those existing neighborhood associations.
Yeah, and we certainly will. There's a group, there's a list of committees and organizations that we had identified in the RFP. It's not an exhaustive list. It was just intended as essentially to make the consultants aware that we plan to go to many different organizations, including neighborhood associations. AIA was one of the groups on that list. Lots of the city committees and commissions as well, and other organizations that are active in the community. So I certainly plan that will happen.
Okay, next question. Since this is such an important effort and our world has changed, should current work for the De La Guerra Plaza, the underpass, to be put aside to allow to be part of this important study? And should the work also extend to Korea Boulevard? Charette 2022 looked at these areas and had many great ideas for these spaces.
So I can start. It's a great point. I think in a perfect world, we would have this project and then subsequent projects that relate to it come after. And that's not how it happened. I believe there's some grant funding that's associated at least with the underpass project. And so they are on a different timeline right now to get that complete because of that funding. De La Guerra Plaza, I'm not sure if there's that element there or not, but that conversation and that project really began before we created the State Street Advisory Committee and before the master plan question became reality for the city. I think regardless of which one goes first, those are projects that along with a couple others downtown that we really need to recognize and make sure are going to align with each other. So I am in conversations with the project managers for both of those projects and for a couple others downtown to make sure that the actual design of some of those projects doesn't get too far ahead and assume that State Street or the general area will or won't have certain elements. And what I mean by that, just as an example, is trash pickup. For example, for De La Guerra Plaza. So if State Street was closed in that area and we did not allow vehicles or delivery what have you, for whatever reason, then trash pickup might need to shift for De La Guerra Plaza because they may be assuming that State Street is taking that on. That's just an example, but we want to make sure that the designs are going to talk to each other. I'll also just say, yes, we have a long process ahead of us, but I'm really hopeful that we're going to have a pretty solid understanding within the next year of the plan and where we're headed and what some of those main questions are so that other projects can continue to move forward too.
Okay, next question, will the proposal need ABR approval?
So it will need Historic Landmarks, HLC approval, Historic Landmarks Commission approval.
Well, hang on for that one, Tess. It depends on what the plan is. If the plan
That's
is, it's a visioning plan, which has elements which may go through, whether HLC have to formally adopt or approve that will be something to be determined. I think that's yet to be determined based upon the scope of the plan.
Good point, Dave.
Clearly, all the elements within there in terms of streetscape and aesthetic design elements or what have you, all of that will. If the visioning plan is simply a visioning plan to be implemented in pieces, there are going to be general plan amendments, circulation element amendments, there are going to be approvals by historic landmarks down the line, but TBD.
Okay, next question. I think we're down to a couple minutes here, so this will probably be our last. What is the anticipated scope of services for the consultant to be engaged? Has the committee considered developing a detailed brief that might enable a national design competition for that work?
So go for it, Dave.
No, go ahead.
So we looked at the different, we looked at the scope of work a number of times with the State Street Advisory Committee and with council. It really came out of that State Street Subcommittee, the initial recommendations for the scope of work, and then that minor modifications were made throughout the advisory committee process and the council process. But ultimately, it's a long list. There's streetscape design, transportation and circulation, economic development, historic resources, view corridors, stormwater management, sustainability, equity, accessibility, homelessness engagement, housing, public art, implementation and phasing, funding strategies, ongoing operations and maintenance, and safety. So, and those are broad topics, right? Each one of those could have its own. We could kind of dive deep into each one. And so I see the plan as touching each one in different ways. And it really depends on what the ultimate vision will be for downtown.
Okay, and I was not correct about having to end at 1. We have 50 more minutes, so we'll do the next question here. I love the talk of community involvement and specifically how to engage usage in various ways. I think that the more people have input, the more ideas and perspectives that lead to something. For example, I know a cool US soccer program that concentrates on putting mini pitches in communities. A closed Stride Street might be a great spot. Cheers, looking forward to great movement forward. So I guess it's
again, going back to that kind of flexibility and temporary use and what have you. Yes, all of the above. And again, I'll just tell you, going into this is a blank sheet for the community basically to draw on. So we're really looking forward to ideas such as that.
You know, I don't see any other questions. So Dave and Tess, did you want to, talk further about anything in detail that the questions brought up for you about, and I would say also just even maybe guide the AIA how to best engage with the process, with the committee, with all those things we're seeing here. Okay.
There's two things I like to say in terms of engagement. One is we'd really like you to come and, if again, re-educate or educate for the first time our committee upon the charrettes and the work that you've done to date. And Tess, I think, want to extend that invitation to you to come to our April meeting in that regard. And that doesn't mean that's done. In fact, that's just basically, we're trying to educate ourselves. So when we hit the starting gate, we're all on the same page. The second thing is that when we have a public participation process, we'd like to come back and tell you what that is, and to show you basically where you plug into that process, and then really basically make a partnership here and make it happen.
Tess, did
Yeah,
you want
we
to
really-
add something? Go
I'll
ahead.
just add that, we really do, I hope that you see it the same way, but we really see it as a partnership. And I really value all the work that the AIA has done so far. And I certainly want to continue to have just great dialogue and conversation and to be able to work collaboratively with all of you. It's obviously a really exciting project, and many of you saw that during the design charrettes that have happened before. And I think just being able to think about the space and going back to the conversation, the example of the soccer conversation. I mean, one of the pieces that I'm really excited about is how are we going to activate the space or program the space differently than it exists today. And we can build a beautiful downtown, but without thinking about how it's going to be utilized for the entire community, I think is really missing a piece there. And so that I appreciate that comment, because there are so many ideas that are in my head for different things that can be done downtown that aren't there currently. And I'm sure many of you have ideas too. So it's just one example of ways to collaborate between the various groups. And certainly I put my email in the chat, but I'm always open to a conversation by email or phone, or happy to meet as well and discuss it a little bit further.
I see two more comments in there, Paul. One from Steve Fort relative to the timeline. Tess, is our PowerPoint here available to AIA to look at after this?
I will send it. Yep, I'll
Yeah,
send it out
okay.
after.
So that slide you're looking for, Steve's in there. That's got the time frame in there. That's good. And then Joe, you have two major decisions: bikes and parades. Yeah, those are two really big dogs things. And again, if you go back to the beginning, you have that little ad hoc committee. They're struggling with those two issues right now, having that debate. That doesn't mean we're not going to have that larger debate again. They're talking about portability for the, both for parades and what have you. And again, the uses in terms of bikes and what have you, something which is long before we get down the road on the master plan. Council's ad hoc committee is going to be struggling with that in terms of current operations, which will input then into the long-term picture. And I know, just hearing from my bicycle friends, right, they're going to the map. They want bicycles on State Street. So stay tuned.
And Dave, if you want to just continue with the posted questions directly, that'd be great.
Yeah, great.
Maybe while we look, just as sorry, there's a truck outside my window for the schedule. We're looking at decision maker hearings on the final master plan being completed in around Q2 of 2024, but potentially sooner than that. So between the end of 2023 and early 2024 is when we're anticipating the plan to really be done and ready to go.
I'm going to Cass's question about are we on the underpass? In some way, basically, are we missing an opportunity? Well, frankly, I think Tessa's answer is both De La Guerra Plaza and the underpass are being considered by the city in their own processes. And again, integrating those into the master plan process is something we're looking at. There's no way we're basically saying timeout for 2 years on the underpass. I think with that project's moving forward on its own path. You correct? Am I correct, Tess?
Yeah, that's correct. And so really, yeah, it is. I'm trying to work we're working collaboratively to figure out what we can, kind of understand best and how our projects are going to influence each other. But, primarily because of funding, that project is moving ahead and is further on in the process.
You've got items like De La Guerra Plaza, the underpass. You've got the housing discussions the city's doing. You've got the farmers market moving to Korea. All those things are coming. Those are pieces that'll go into here, and whether they continue long into the long-term vision. I think they're on their own path, and they're either going to plug and play, or they're basically going to be moved aside within the next year. But that's to be determined on that one too. That's part of the process.
That's another topic that we're looking at potentially bringing to the State Street Advisory Committee in the future is what projects are currently happening right now downtown, and how is that how does that sort of play a role or not play a role in the master plan?
Now, there's one, I guess, a comment from Fred Sweeney here. I hope that the committee will look at the 1924 Cheney Olmsted report that set in place much of what we see today. This is one of the major planning efforts that the wisdom of leaders of Santa Barbara implements our architecture is known around the world. So he's just he's saying to look at that 1924 report. Maybe good to put on the resources page, Tess, if we can get a hold of it.
Yeah, certainly. I'll make a note of that. I think just in response to that too, we definitely will be looking at things that have happened in the past, because that's part, right? Santa Barbara's history in general is a lot of the makeup of our community. And so I think it's important to reflect and look back on that. I've started other meetings this way because I think it's really interesting, and maybe you all already know this, but I pulled the 1964 general plan, which is on our resources page now and is scanned. But that document talked about State Street as being having a pedestrianized area. And I just think it's been talked about for decades and decades and decades, back to the first general plan for the city. And so it's a true opportunity, and I'm grateful that we are where we are today.
I will make an editorial comment. Anytime we do this, there will be a challenge to the status quo. Already we've been hearing things like, why is this an EPV? Why do we have to comply with these architectural guidelines? Why can't we do something different? So we will have a lot of debate within the community relative to change. And change is scary, change is difficult, but it's also a tremendous opportunity. But some of those voices are already being heard.
Okay, next question. Are you considering the possibility of multiple firms for the collaboration of the design, or a local firm with a larger firm?
So without really getting into specifics on the proposals, oftentimes they are with multiple team members or multiple groups. And so, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there are multiple firms or organizations that are working collaboratively with the city on the project.
And we've stressed to Tess and the rest of the staff, I think it's very important to have at least local roots in terms of what's happening here. So we're looking at that also in the selection process, their knowledge and work here in the Santa Barbara area.
And that's one of the, there's evaluation criteria that in the request for proposals, but one of them is the local knowledge or local understanding and expertise. So, I mean, that's something that each proposal will be scored against as well.
Okay, and I'm looking at the time here. We want to be respectful of everybody's time, particularly with the amazing amount of volunteer effort by both Dave, Suzanne, and Ed, and obviously Tess in leading that group. And we thank you for what we think is a really productive continuing dialogue with AIA, and we so appreciate you making this presentation and including us in your thinking and kind of taking advantage of what we've been able to get organized with the community. And I would only add that the AIA has a robust mentor program, so we're very connected to youth across the region. And so just see us as an opportunity where let's look for an opportunity where we can plug our network of youth into this process, so their voice is part of what we're doing. Now with that, I'll give you back to Elena, our president, to kind of close out the meeting.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Thank you, Tess and Dave. Really, really interesting, and we really appreciate the dialogue. So thank you again for your time, and thank you all for attending. We're happy to see so many people here, and we're hoping that our general meeting in June, which is the next one scheduled, can actually be in person. So be on the lookout for more news about that coming soon. Also, just a reminder that this has been recorded, and so if you want to watch it again or share with colleagues, the recording will go up on the AIA website shortly. And with that, I'll wish everyone a great rest of their day. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for participating, everybody. And thanks, Tess and Dave and Suzanne and Ed. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.